sort of just one day realized, like, I feel really good. I haven't had an issue with intrusive thoughts about death in months, which is something that had just been a normal part of my life, like just kind of accepted it. And when I realized that that kind of thing wasn't happening anymore, work was easier, everything was easier. That's when I realized that, like, I should actually be carnivore as a lifestyle rather than just simplifying things. And, I really found not having to think about what I was going to eat or anything like that was relaxing.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have a guest, Gene, who's going to be, sharing his journey with us today. So, Gene, good morning. Or I think, where are you located, Gene?
Good morning. I'm in Waynesboro, Virginia.
Okay, so it's still, well, it might be noon there. So
it's just noon now.
Just noon Eastern time. Okay, well, welcome, Gene. Thank you for doing this. Well, let's just get into it. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you've been and where you've gotten to, I suppose.
About 5 years ago, just turned 40. I was a little over 200 pounds. I was having a little too much use of alcohol. Yeah, I was not in a good place. I'd kind of suffered my whole life with depression issues, kind of probably a pretty standard story by this point. Decided to quit drinking. I had just gotten to a place where I wanted to get out of that. So that was kind of my first step through. And then I started carnivore almost accidentally about 8 months after I stopped drinking. I had just kind of eaten fewer and fewer vegetables. Started with paleo and then just kind of wandered into carnivore. I guess I just joined Revero a few months ago. I had gotten off the track a little bit through 2021, and the community has really been helpful to sort of keep me on the path that I want to be on.
What, I mean, you said you've had issues with drinking. I don't know if you call yourself an alcoholic or whatever. It's what was the straw that broke the camel's back that said, hey, I got to clean things up? Was there something health going on, life event going on, or was there something that made you change your ways?
I guess really the triggering event for me was my dog died, which maybe doesn't sound like that severe of an event in the grand scheme of things, but it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. My wife and I had gotten this dog together when we first started dating. And when she died, I just had this moment where I felt like either I was going to accept what was going on and start feeling the emotions that went along with that, or I was going to go down a path where I just would end up in the same place that my dad had, who also had a drinking problem. And I knew where that path ended, right? That ended with me living in an apartment by myself with no real relationships around me. And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that is a kind of a scary proposition. There's a lot of people that unfortunately are in that situation where they're kind of, they've kind of isolated themselves. And so, you've got this, so you said you accidentally stopped eating vegetables. It's kind of funny because most people, we think, I assume at some point you give up drinking. Hey, I'm going to take care of myself. Maybe start eating better, all those types of things. And most people assume that, I'm just going to start eating a bunch of salads and vegetables and that's going to make me feel better, or that's what people are told. How did you discover that I'm going to go carnivore accidentally? Had you heard about the carnivore diet at that point, or was it completely off the radar?
Starting way back, I'd read Gary Taubes' book, Good Calories, Bad Calories. And I'd started learning about keto, learning about those kinds of things. And I probably first ran across the idea of the carnivore diet in 2015, 2016, on Reddit. It must have been the zero carb subreddit, but I think I found it through learning about Keto Gains, which is a group that does sort of exercise and fitness based keto. And they were pretty instrumental because at the time the keto community was not big into having much protein. Those guys sort of took that fear away. And so I had all of that groundwork sort of in my mind when I decided to change the direction I was going.
Yeah, 2015, 2016, that's when I started, when I started really looking into carnivore, and, 2016 is when I actually started. And I was kind of reading about it probably the same time as you, 2015. And yeah, Louis Villaseñor, I've met several times, great guy, and also Tyler Cartwright, I believe is the other one, also good people. So they have put out a lot of good information. So you got a little bit of background. Of course, I read Gary's book as well, and I've talked to Gary many times, interviewed him several times. I think Gary's done a great service in waking people up to at least question things. A lot of people think he's, don't think he's right, but certainly questioning the nutritional sort of dogma, I think, is important to do regardless. I think all science needs to be questioned. And so once we stop doing that, it becomes religion, which is a problem. So let's talk about the transition. How did you decided, you decided 8 months after going, quitting alcohol, I'm going to do carnivore. How did that happen for you? How did that go? Any transition issues? What did you do?
So I didn't really have any transition issues. I actually joined a Keto Gains boot camp, and I went through one of those at the beginning of the year. And then I did a second one in the summer of 2018. And sort of as I was going through that, I just found that, trying to do the meal planning for that sort of strict system was really easy if you just bought like 80-20 hamburger and cooked it the same way every day. And then you didn't have to worry about like trying to do balancing or anything like that. And I just didn't feel any kind of need for vegetables. I sort of just one day realized, like, I feel really good. I haven't had an issue with intrusive thoughts about death in months, which is something that had just been a normal part of my life. Like, I just kind of accepted it. And when I realized that kind of thing wasn't happening anymore, and like work was easier and just everything was easier, that's when I realized that like I should actually be carnivore as a lifestyle rather than just simplifying things. And, I really found not having to think about what I was going to eat or anything like that was relaxing.
Yeah. Well, let me just so to clarify, to make sure I understand. So you were eating a ketogenic diet, clean diet, vegetables, meat, whatever, and you were having still having some of these intrusive thoughts about death. And when you gave up the vegetables, they went away. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. It's weird because I'm not sure when it happened. I just sort of had the realization one day that it had been weeks at least since it happened. So yeah, it was a fantastic discovery when I had sort of let those things drift out of my life. But it was sort of a gradual tapering down. If I'd been doing it on purpose, maybe I could have seen that result a lot faster.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have a lot of these different diet variations, whether, the Keto Gains, higher protein keto, or Ted Naiman's protein energy ratio. In many cases, all those things are simplified by just eating meat. Just like, well, maybe that's the answer, Of course, the proponents of that will say, well, Ted would say, well, it's not just eating meat, it's just eating high protein energy. And we're like, well, it's a lot simpler if you just eat meat. And probably that's what people had access to, because I didn't have protein powders and all these protein sources like we do today. So you think about that. So it's an interesting thing. So so you're no longer, some people will comment that, and you did it maybe in reverse, or a lot of people will go carnivore and then they quit drinking, or they quit smoking, or they quit whatever vice they might have. Did you find like, when you were able to quit, what did you go through a 12-step program, or did you just do it on your own and cold turkey it? And some people will say the cravings for whatever go away. And I don't know if you noticed an improvement in cravings for alcohol, or if you even had them. I don't know.
I used a book by a man named Alan Carr called The Easy Way to Control Alcohol. And I had previously, like 10 years before, used his methodology to quit smoking. And it's a cold turkey thing. I recommend it to anybody who wants to go down that path. I had good success with it. But for me, I find that cutting something out entirely is pretty easy. It's when you try to moderate things that I have a struggle. Once I went from a person who drank alcohol to a person who doesn't drink alcohol, I didn't really have those craving issues. Where I did find similar, I guess, mental health benefits is just everywhere else. I guess I was pretty fortunate that I didn't have to go down to a rock bottom for the alcohol, but ADHD, depression, all of that stuff got better, including enabling me to go to college, which is something that I had tried several times and was just never able to sustain because I would just get overwhelmed almost immediately.
Well, first of all, congrats on that and going and getting some more education. Can always be beneficial for us. Also, some people think college is a waste of time. Now it's kind of interesting how that goes, but it can open some doors, certainly for some people. You showed us all these benefits, ADHD. You mentioned you were 200 pounds back whenever. Where are you at today?
About 175 now. I'm only 5'7.5", so I'm not a very large person to begin with. So, when I think my highest weight was like 205, and that was a lot of weight to carry. Like, I'd have to prepare myself with a couple of deep breaths before I tried to lean forward to tie my shoes. And a lot of it was sort of that under the muscle abdominal fat, which was a problem.
Well, yeah, the visceral fat, that can be definitely problematic in a number of ways. I noticed. I'm just noticing. You sure you got a cross country shirt? Are you running now or something? Are you doing some running?
Yeah. So this is actually my son's cross country team.
I got it
at his high school here. But I was always pretty active. Running and mountain biking is the only thing that ever gave me relief pre-carnivore. To some of my stuff, I could go run, but when I got done running, it always hurt. My knees would always be wrecked. And, now I've gone a couple of years with no running related injuries. So, these days I do CrossFit and running and mountain biking. I did a Spartan race on Saturday. It's just been really great.
And you're doing that with basically no carbohydrates, I guess. Is that fair to say, or very little with carnivore?
I haven't had any significant amount of carbs in 4.5 years now.
And you're able to do running and Spartan races and CrossFit and all that stuff despite that.
Oh yeah. So I've run distances up to half marathons, 3.5 hour bike rides, things like that. For anything, when I get into the 3 hour range, I'll take a snack with me. But other than that, I just go out and do whatever I'm doing.
What are you snacking on, just out of curiosity?
I bought a box of carnivore bars for those long bike rides.
Okay. Well, Philip Neese will be happy to hear that. He's a provider carnivore. Phil's a good guy. So that's basically a pemmican type product. So yeah, good for you. That's great. Yeah. So how, you mentioned your wife and you just mentioned your son. Has the family noticed a change in how you are? I surely have to. If they live with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I'm still who I was, but sort of the version of me that I'm supposed to be. I spend a lot less time withdrawn. And of course, I'm a lot more available because I'm not consuming alcohol anymore, right? Like, so that means I'm much more present when I am here. I like to think that it's made me a better husband and father, but you'd have to ask them.
Yeah, I suspect they would probably say you were, but I don't know. I'm just speculating there. I think it's fair to say that you probably say your quality of life has improved over the last several years since you've
Without a
adopted
doubt.
ketogenic and then carnivore diet. And then the critics of this would say, well, carnivore diet or ketogenic diet might increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. What are your thoughts regarding that? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's debatable, but let's just assume it does. Let's just say, yes, you increase your risk of cardiovascular disease by 20% by doing what you do. Would you change anything, or what would you do?
If you kind of bypass just cardiovascular disease and you look at all the stuff you could die on, an obese person with an alcohol abuse issue and depression with suicidal ideation is not a person who's going to have a good, long, productive life. That's the difference I'm looking at there, right? Like somebody who was on a path that would eventually lead them to being completely isolated from society, or somebody who is really out there living and enjoying life. And, if it's 5 fewer years or 10 fewer years, they're much better years this way than they would have been the way I was going.
Yeah. So you definitely would pick quality of life over quantity of life. And it very may well be that you're living longer anyway, because, like you mentioned, alcohol, persistent thoughts about death, depression, all those issues. There are a lot of ways your life could have been shortened in that regard. And so that's usually what I hear from most people, because their quality of life has improved so much. And it's hard to believe that, you improve your health so much and yet you've raised your risk. Well, just dropping the 25, 30 pounds you dropped and the alcohol and some of the other stuff has probably on net improved your cardiovascular health. I think that's not an unreasonable assessment. And I think that's something we have to all kind of come to terms with. Any physicians involved in your transition? Do you go see the doctor regularly, or can you tell us about that if that exists?
I lost most of my weight just kind of in one stretch from February to maybe July of 2018. And right toward the end of that, I went to the doctor and they did my blood work and my total cholesterol was something like 385. Mm-hmm. They lost their minds.
I was going to say that induces a heart attack in the doctor, not maybe you, but the doctor sees that and, oh my God, let's start eating. Yeah. You need to be on 6 statins and eat some cardboard and, take every drug known to man to lower that thing right away. Okay. So yeah, you get the typical response.
Yeah, absolutely freaked them out. And they're like, and I just told them straight out, I'm like, look, I'm in the middle of weight loss. I would expect things to be wacky right now. And I'm not going to take a statin because I feel fantastic. And everybody I've known that's ever taken one has been miserable, from the side effects. So they said, fine, try to fix it with diet and exercise. I went back the next time. It was improved from their perspective, but it wasn't where they wanted to see it. So they tried to give me other medication to lower cholesterol. It wasn't a statin. It was had a different mechanism. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fine, whatever. I never filled it. And then the next time I went back to the doctor, the numbers were improved again. And I had told them that I never filled that prescription and I didn't take the medication. And then the doctor came in and said, hey, your numbers look better. The drug's working. I'm going to up your dose. And that's when I realized that the doctors are paying no attention to anything that you're saying. And also the doctor obviously didn't care about any of my physiologic metrics except for that cholesterol number. And so that was the last time I saw them.
That's unfortunate. I mean, maybe the nurse didn't tell them or something. I don't know. I mean, I can't say. I've been in the position where, you don't always get all the information. And, most doctors are running around like chickens with their heads cut off trying to keep up with their patient load. Unfortunately, it's a very inefficient in a system where, as some of us have seen, medical errors are the number 3 leading cause of death in the United States, or put out that way. And so you wonder, has that something to do with it? And I don't doubt it. So you still have relatively high cholesterol. I don't know what it is. It was 3 something and now it's 2 something maybe. I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, it's I don't know, 250-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on, what studies you look at, I mean, there's all-cause mortality data which shows that number is on an all-cause mortality, not that big of a deal. Now, the critics would say that's reverse causality, and it just shows that people with lower cholesterol get sick and die. That they're already sick and dying, and so it's confusing for a lot of people. Blood pressure? I don't know when the last time you checked it. That's another risk factor that tends to be quite predictive for disease.
So I have gotten a new doctor. It's a direct primary care doc. Okay. So he's a lot more receptive to my activities, a lot more willing to work with me. So my blood pressure is in the ideal range. Yeah. Where it was borderline hypertensive pre-carnivore, and my liver enzyme numbers, which were of course elevated when I was drinking, are all good. And I went from a 39-inch waist to a 32-inch waist. Yeah. So physiologically, everything is great except that LDL number.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We continue to see this, and the more I see it, the more I wonder. It's like, why would this one marker only go up and everything else get better? And then there's people say, well, hey, why don't you could have done this? You could have lost the weight, and if you had just eaten, a diet focused on, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and lower fat and that type of stuff. There's a lot of people would say the lean protein cuts. Why did you ever try that? Why don't you think that would work for you, or do you think it might work for you?
So way back in the early 2000s, when it first came out, I did South Beach, lean proteins, lots of olive oil, lots of veggies and fruits and beans and all of that stuff. I did lose weight doing that, but I wasn't well. I wasn't vigorous living that way. And I really could not wait to stop eating like that. And that's not been the experience in carnivore. Like, I never go in to go eat a hamburger. I'm like, I can't believe I have to eat hamburgers again. Like, I'm happy about it every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I just mentioned yesterday, I've been doing this for 6 years, solid carnivore, and before that keto. And, I've been playing with nutrition for about 12, 13 years now. And I was thinking, I said, this is probably something like 6,000 steaks I've had in the last 6 years. And I never disappoints me. I'm always satisfied when I eat it. I always I look forward to it. I've got 2 steaks cooking right now. And when I get done interviewing you and doing some consultations, I'll eat those, and I'm going to look forward to that. Steak and eggs, I look forward to every day. So it is nice that it's, like I said, you can enjoy the food, because I've always said this: if you're hungry all the time or you don't enjoy your food, you're never going to stick to this diet. This is never going to happen. You got to find something you enjoy and that actually deals with hunger. And that's something, I guess, because do you find that the simplicity, and do you have a decent level of satiety where you don't have to constantly obsess about how much you're eating or calculate? Is it just pretty intuitive for you at this point?
I tend to cook in big batches, so I plan ahead a little bit, but yeah, I go to the grocery store, I buy whatever beef is the cheapest that week, and I take it home and I cook it and I eat it, and it's great.
What do you spend a week on, feeding yourself, would you estimate? Because a lot of people say this is impractical for the average person. No one can afford a carnivore diet. Now, I eat steaks quite a bit. Fortunately, I'm in a position where I can afford that, but I realize not everybody's there. But what are you spending, say weekly, or if you could guess?
I just bought groceries this morning for about a week's worth, and it came out to $85, $90 right in there.
Yeah, that's, again, most people should be able to afford that in the U.S. anyway. Now, like I said, if you're living in, sub-Saharan Africa or something like that, you're not going to have the income to do that, perhaps. But most of us in Western, and that's ground beef, maybe eggs. I don't know. What are you mostly focusing on?
So usually 80-20 ground beef. I eat a lot of chuck, because it's got a reasonable amount of fat, and it's nice and beefy.
Yeah. How do you cook?
I really like the flavor of chuck.
Yeah, chuck roasts are good. I got a couple of those. I cook them up here. How do you cook them, by the way?
A lot of times I'll kind of cut them into sort of 2x2 by however long the thing is. strips, and I'll cook those at a low temperature for like 45 minutes and eat them kind of like steak.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the same way I would eat steak, rather than slow cooking them.
Okay. Very nice. Good for you. And so $80 a week for your food. Is your family eating carnivore or somewhat carnivore or more meat, or have they changed their diet since you've changed yours?
Neither my wife and her son are carnivore, but they both do eat, by American standards anymore anyway, quite a lot of meat. My son takes a couple of burger patties for lunch every day. Mm-hmm. So he's probably eating at least a pound of meat a day, and he only weighs like 90 pounds. I mean,
how old is he?
He's 14.
Okay. So he's a pretty thin guy still. Yeah.
Yeah. He's we run small in my family. So, but yeah, I mean, so he eats a pretty large amount of meat. He's taking health classes right now, and he gets mad every time they talk about nutrition. So he's on the path.
I'm just curious. Why? I mean, are they telling him that meat is bad and eat vegetables and eat bugs and stuff like that, or what's making them mad? Yeah,
so they're pushing on low protein, high carb. Of course, the cross country team, they talk a lot about carb loading, and he doesn't do any of that. Right? He just eats an extra hamburger on race day. He recognizes that the meat eating that he's doing is benefiting him, because he looks around and there's a lot of overweight kids in schools.
Yeah. Something like 20% of our kids in the United States now are obese. 20%. That's a lot. Yeah. That's huge. When I went to school, there was one fat kid. I mean, literally, and I can remember my whole school with one fat kid. Now probably 50% are overweight and 20% are obese. It's maddening. It's crazy. So he's not having any issues performing, not eating a high-carb diet. And neither are you, and neither is pretty much anybody that does this for the most part. A few people, they get transition, they don't want to stick with it. But what are you going back to school for? Just out of curiosity.
I'm getting a degree in business administration management. Mm-hmm. The company I work for is paying for it, so I've been doing it all online. It's been really good. Sort of an example of contrast. In high school, I graduated high school with the lowest possible grade they would let me get out of there with. When I tried to do school, I would just get overwhelmed and have to stop. In the last 4 years, I completed my associate's degree with honors, and I'm currently on path to finish my bachelor's degree with honors. Which is wild.
That's awesome. Yeah, from going to barely getting out of high school to getting through college with honors. I mean, is it fair to say that meat is making your brain work better? Or you think is that a fair assessment?
I mean, the big thing, I think, like the emotional stability, the control over my own frustrations and anxieties and things. It's just things don't have an impact on me the same way that they did when I was younger.
Do you think that's just a product of being older and more wise, or do you think the actual diet is having an impact here? Because some people say, well, you're just more mature, you're older. I don't know.
Certainly some kinds of control got better with age, but 40 to 45 isn't that much aging,
right?
To have the level of difference that I've experienced.
Have you had any negatives since you've transitioned to carnivore style diet?
The only places where it's an issue are things like work-based social activities. Mm-hmm. Let's all have a team lunch, or, we brought in bagels for everybody, things like that. It's just a little awkward, but it's not really a problem. I've been fortunate. I work with a really good team, and everybody knows that, what's for lunch? Pound of meat. So the people on my team, it's kind of the people that I work with all the time. It's really the more kind of distant people who are like, hey, we brought in lunch for everybody. What do you want from Panera? And it's like nothing. Everything they have there is disgusting, even their meat. But to be honest, not drinking made that awkward before carnivore made it awkward. So I don't get bothered by it, really.
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, you said you work with some people fairly closely and others kind of, more or less frequently. So the people you work with closely, mm-hmm. they've probably also seen this transformation. Any of them curious? Any of them say, hey, any of them thought about trying it, or they all think you're crazy?
None of them are willing to tell me they think I'm crazy, but none of them have tried it either. I think in their minds, they see me working out and doing stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're lean and you're fit because you work out all the time, not because of your diet." And they don't understand that it's the reverse situation, no matter what I tell them.
I mean, like I said, and some people see that. I mean, because people say, well, the only reason you're like me because you work out. The only reason you're healthy because you work out. And, maybe that's true. Maybe the only reason I can do a carnivore diet is because I work out, but then I see all these people that don't. And I just see that all the time. They're not doing that. And yet their health dramatically improves as well. You mentioned ADHD at one point, I think you said in there. I mean, how did that manifest itself? And I mean, were you formally diagnosed? Were you on medication for that? And how has that improved?
So in elementary school, I was diagnosed, and I was on meds for it until we moved to rural Virginia when I was a kid. And at the time, none of the doctors really knew anything about ADHD or like the meds that went along with it. And so my mom was like, well, I'm not going to have you taking medications that your doctors don't know anything about, even if they're willing to write the scripts for them. When I was a kid, I was incredibly disruptive to the other classes. Like at one school, they just kept me in a closet because I couldn't interact with other kids, right? And so I was often separated. It was frustrating, talking about my academics again. It was frustrating for my parents because I was both really smart and completely unable to apply that to anything. And so like I was the first kid in my school that was both in the gifted program and in the learning disability program. Happens all the time now, but it wasn't something that they did in the country in Virginia in the late 80s. It was almost crippling. And as an adult, it was better. You kind of learn coping strategies and things. I couldn't stick with a training program if I wanted to train to do a running thing. I couldn't stick with school. I could only really stick with jobs because you had that constant enforcement every day of like, hey, you got to go to work. You're not going to eat. But anything other than the minimum to survive, like I just couldn't manage it. I couldn't keep control over it.
And so change today for sure. Sounds like.
Absolutely. Now I manage a team of engineers and technicians doing research and development. I'm controlling this whole group of people and helping assign tasks and decide where we're going. And that's not stuff that I could have done 5 years ago.
How about because you mentioned you did the South Beach diet a while ago, lean meats, olive oil, vegetables. Mm-hmm. Was that better for you? I mean, because some people say, well, if you're just eating Oreos and ice cream all day, yeah, you're going to be messed up. But if you eat a whole food, clean diet, regardless, it's going to be better. Was it better on South Beach? Is it better now compared to South Beach, or what are your thoughts?
South Beach didn't really get me anything. Like I lost some weight on it, but it wasn't. Let me back up. South Beach, I think, had the same problem that Atkins ended up having, which was the whole point of the diet is you go really strict and then you move back to closer to a standard American diet. Like it's a phased approach and you do those things. And as soon as you start coming back, it leads you right down the path you were on to start with. And you never change anything. Other part of it that I think more information is coming out about now is what the saturated fats do for you versus the unsaturated fats. And that was something that I only started hearing about relatively recently. And I think that part has probably made more of a difference for me than anything, getting rid of the vegetable oils and just living off of the fat that's in the meat.
Well, certainly, I mean, it's arguable that humans live considerably on fat from the cayman animals. I mean, through a lot of our early existence, and clearly the vegetables oils didn't even exist prior to 150 years ago. I think the 1860s when we started using them, when we started Eli Whitney and his cotton gin, and we had all this cotton production with all this cottonseed oil left over, and they turn that into, from an industrial lubricant, into now food for humans. And we've been eating that now since then, and certainly in greater and greater doses. Yeah. So, and you said there's more information coming out on saturated fats, the benefits of saturated fat. Is there something you're specifically referring to? Is there any kind of particular studies you've seen?
I'm trying to think of the name of the guy, the croissant diet guy.
Oh, Brad, I think his name is Brad Marshall, the Fire and
Yeah, Brad Marshall.
Yeah, I've interviewed Brad before, sure.
Yeah. He's got a ton of information sort of about that, but
I think particularly looking at stearic acid, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was
but from my individual experience, what I saw was whenever I would get into something that had more of those omega-6 fats, it really drove issues with my gout in particular, which we hadn't even talked about.
Let's talk about gout, because a lot of people are scared to go on a carnivore diet because they're worried about gout. So tell us about your gout experience.
So, of course, when I was drinking beer, I was having struggles with gout.
Right.
And even after I cut that out, what I found is we made chicken soup. Took a whole chicken, boiled the bones to make the broth in it, cooked the chicken. And when I ate that chicken soup, I immediately had a gout flare, even though it was completely carnivore. Like there weren't even really any herbs in it. It was just chicken. Then I would see the same thing if I had too much pork, which pork meat also tends to be higher in those omega-6. Those are the only things, since I made this dietary change, those are the only times when I've had any issues with gout at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing there was I think it was kidney stones, but the same applies. Metabolic syndrome and gout are highly related. And as you lose weight, as you get leaner, drive down inflammatory issues, gout tends to go away. And so you're eating, I don't know what you mentioned, ground beef every day, red meat every day, and no gout flare-ups. Because a lot of people will, they'll say, hey, stop eating red meat when it comes to having gout. But that's, your experience has been not that, correct?
That is absolutely correct. My kind of default intake is 2 pounds of beef and 4 eggs.
Yeah.
It's sort of like my baseline. If I'm hungrier, I eat more, but that's kind of what I plan for. And no problems at all.
So 2 pounds of beef, 4 eggs, that's 2,200 calories a day, 2,300 calories, something like that. I'm guessing somewhere in that neighborhood. Obviously no longer drinking alcohol. Where did you experience a gout? Knees, toes, ankles? Where was it typically located?
So typically, of course, my big toe joints, I had it in my right index finger. I've had it in my ankle. It migrates around, if you go through it for long enough, like my middle toe on my right foot, just all over the place. And it's sometimes hard to sort of separate, when you're kind of in that condition of like, which things are gout and which things are just your joints hurting, because your joints also hurt all the time when you're in that sort of generally miserable state of being. I used to also have knee pain that I don't think was gout, and one spot in my back that would hurt sort of between my vertebrae, which I don't think was gout, but has also completely gone away.
So, ground beef, 80-20 ground beef, 2 pounds of it a day, $80 a week, and some eggs, has dramatically improved your life. You no longer have symptoms of ADHD. You're no longer overweight. Alcohol cravings are gone. Gout is gone. Body fat is down. You're performing better. Your cognition's better. Is that grass-finished meat that you're using, or is it just whatever you can afford? It's just a basic supermarket meat.
So like the stuff I got today, I got from, it was 4-pound packs of 1/3 pound patties, from Walmart Neighborhood Market, just like whatever the Walmart labeled stuff is.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the chuck. It's just like the regular styro pack beef.
And are you including organ meats? Are you eating liver and kidney and all that stuff? A lot of people would recommend that. Is that something you consume?
No, it's too much. It's too much work. Now I do buy a half a steer each year from a friend of mine who raises cattle in the town that we grew up in. And so sometimes that'll, come with like a liver or something, and I'll mix that into some ground beef in small amounts. But I like liver, but not in large quantities.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about are you focusing on, you said 80-20 ground beef, so you're getting a decent amount of fat there. You're not, are you sort of high protein, high fat? I mean, you mentioned the keto gains boot camp, which tends to be higher on the protein side.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still, do you know what your macronutrient ratio is out of curiosity? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, we could count, 80-20 ground beef and eggs. I mean, it's probably, you're probably getting 60-70% of your calories from fat, I'm guessing, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think the last time I looked, I was at somewhere between 30 and 35% protein.
Yeah.
Usually when I cook eggs, I'll put a lot of butter in them. Cause if you kind of cook eggs slow, and stir them a lot, you can incorporate a tremendous amount of fat into them, and not run as high a risk of the disaster pants. But yeah, and when I eat my burgers, like if I've had a heavy exercise day, like I'll spread butter on top of them. I don't really worry about macros much. Like I just go eat and it's good. And if I'm hungry, I go eat some more, and I just don't put that much effort into it.
Yeah. I mean, how satisfied are you with the diet? I mean, do you feel pretty satisfied? Do you feel like I'm missing out on stuff?
No, I've got a dog that we feed. He eats ground beef.
Mm-hmm.
And he eats whatever ground beef is the cheapest. And every time I get out ground beef, that dog is super excited to see that ground beef. If I gave him ground beef 10 minutes ago and I get out more ground beef, he's excited to see that ground beef. And I'm kind of in the same place. Like I'm not like sad eating ground beef. It's like, what do I got? Same thing I had yesterday, and it's still good.
Yeah, same thing. My dogs eat ground beef, and sometimes I'll throw some chicken. I've been throwing chicken in there lately, and they've been. I mean, yeah, there's my biggest. She's dancing when it's time to eat, and they eat one meal a day, and they're great. Yeah. They're happy as can be, and occasionally we'll give them maybe I'll give them a little crisp or something like that, a little meat crisp or something like that, or chicken piece. Sometimes as a snack once in a while, but yeah, they're happy and they're drooling. The biggest problem is my big dog starts drooling. The meat comes out, you got to clean the drool up off the floor. And I'm kind of the same way when I'm cooking my steaks, thinking about it, I'm literally feel like I'm starting to drool because it is just so powerfully, viscerally motivating. That's what you're designed to eat. I think, you see that and it's like, wow, this is really really good for me. So, I mean, you mentioned both wife and son, and I don't know if you have any other people over the house. They're eating, other things. Does it bother you to have those things in the house? I mean, they have their little snack foods, I'm sure. I mean, do you have any, are you ever tempted to deal with that?
Not really. It's sort of the same thing with not drinking, I just don't eat that stuff. I do eat beef. And I'm happy to do that anytime. But I don't eat those other things. And so it's just it's not an object of temptation because it's not food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of consider it's just like it might as well be a piece of furniture. You're just not interested in eating it. Right. Do you ever, you mentioned, I think you said you mentioned a little bit of cheese here and there or something like that. Pork, chicken, bacon, seafood, any of those things make it way into their diet from time to time?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll have a couple of slices of pork. I don't generally do very much. Sometimes I'll do some cheese if I get a craving. But generally it's like an accent rather than, a significant part of my diet. Occasionally I'll go through a phase where I want some extra fat. So I'll bring in some more dairy fat into my diet because it's easy to get. It's easy to add in. 95% of the time, it's just beef or just eggs, quite a bit of butter.
We are, and just as we're running out of time, I want to ask this question. I ask this to a lot of people. We're in a place where a lot of people think that we should, dramatically scale back or eliminate on our consumption of meat, and particularly red meat, particularly beef. If, it became suddenly very difficult for you to obtain or unaffordable or something, or restricted, where they put a a limit on how much meat you could eat. Like, you're only allowed to eat 2 pounds a week or something like that. What would that do to you physically, mentally, health wise? Would that be a problem for you?
Like if somehow it became impossible for me to get a hold of ruminant meat, it would ruin my life. It would literally ruin my life. Fortunately, I live in a rural area, so I could always take up deer hunting. There's a few million acres of national forest 10 minutes from my house. We actually live in a pretty, there's a lot of beef that gets raised in my area. Like Polyface Farms is just down the road, and there's, I'm sure that black market cattle raising would go on around here, no matter what happened.
Yeah. It's scary. It's scary to think that problems, and hopefully it'll never come to it. But I think, it's just a reminder that we all need to, you never think, 20 years ago, who the heck, why would they want to get rid of beef? It's food. It makes us healthy. And now there are actually people out there that believe with all their heart and soul that we need to stop this and we need to end animal agriculture. And so those people exist, and in many cases, they have quite a bit of influence and power. So we have to all step back. Are you on social media at all? Do you have any social media stuff?
I post occasionally, but not a lot, to Instagram. Okay. You can find me there at meat.wod, WOD.
Meat workout of the day. Got it.
Meat.wod.
Meat.wod. Okay. So you have a meat workout of the day.
Just sort of a safe place where I can post about my carnivore and exercise activities.
Got it.
But I don't post on there a lot, but anybody's welcome.
Got it. Well, anyway, Glenn, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to meet you and chat with you, and congratulations on the education and furthering and just improving your health. It's great to hear, and I'm sure people that hear this story, I'm sure people can relate. And it's nice to see how easy it can be. It doesn't have to be the fancy, high-end, grass-finished stuff, and you don't have to. It can be very simple, and that's the mess. People have read my book. I basically say you can just go eat McDonald's burger patties every day and you'll be fine in a lot of cases. And a lot of people push back on that, but I see it over and over again, and you're another example of that. And thanks for sharing your story. I guess that's it. Any last minute words you wanted to share with anybody?
Just thanks to all the folks out in the community. I can see a couple of people's faces on here that I see in the online meetings, which I think are probably the best thing about Revero. So
yeah. It's like thanks. I said, I think this community aspect is very, very, very important. And I think I can't emphasize how important it is. And thanks for being part of that. And the rest of you guys, thanks for being part of our community. And you guys are all helping change the world. So thanks so much. We'll be back tomorrow, guys. We've got another success story tomorrow. They just keep coming. For some reason, the success stories keep coming from this diet that's not supposed to work and supposed to be awful and no one should do. But for some reason, the success stories keep coming. I don't understand it. It's kind of confusing. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it. Bye-bye now. Hey, folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. If you guys are enjoying these success stories, well, you can become your own success story. You can do that by heading over to Carnivore.Diet. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial and get started today. We're looking forward to supporting you. Our community is wonderful, and we'd love to see your success.